And good afternoon, everyone. Charles Moscowitz here. Thanks for joining me. Monday through Friday is the usual time for the program, 12 to 1 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, where I hold the fort every afternoon, Monday through Friday. My guest for the special segment is Steven Vlaeyen. He is from Ghent University in Belgium, and he's written an article, he's a psychology major, and he's written an article about the psychology of fascism. Stephen, thank you for joining me this afternoon.
Hello, happy to be here. Yes, very happy.
Thank you very much. So let's get right to the issue. You're studying, I assume, European fascism, and which ultimately manifested itself, of course, in the 20th century with the coming to power of Mussolini and Hitler. What is? Give us a little historical background of the of that movement and the psychology that was going on. What made it? What were these people? Who were these people, and why were they attracted to this kind of ideology?
The main dynamic I tried to bring into the picture really was the mechanism of playing the guilt on someone, putting the guilt and the blame on someone in order to be able to force them to pay for that guilt. So when I tell you you're guilty of something and you say you accept that, like you put on a star on yourself to say that I am a wrong person, then I can tell you, you have to do this, you have to do that. And what they made those people do, it was endless, there were endless games they played with these people. But the essential dynamic really was bringing the blame, putting the blame on them and making them ashamed, while in fact there was nothing to be ashamed of, I think.
In other words, I think what you're talking about is the principle of scapegoating a particular group
Yes.
that can then be dehumanized and demonized. In the case, obviously, of the Nazis, that was the Jews of Europe. It depends. I mean, in this country, it's a dark side of human nature in a way. I mean, Henry Adams, the great early 20th century polemicist, wrote that politics in America is made up of organized hatreds, and that you have people running for office, seeking power, seeking wealth, who will focus everyone's mind as a way to get support on some kind of an external enemy. And, and it galvanizes people. So people will then go to the polls and they'll say, I want to stick it to the man, I want to stick it to rich people. Or in the case of the Nazis, it was the Jews. And it's a very powerful force. I mean, it really, can go to people's darkest elements of their emotions to get them active and to get them busy supporting something that they may not otherwise support.
Yes, I think what you're saying is that they pull people into their aggression towards certain people they are scapegoating. But the main thing is, I think, that the people they are trying to push into this anti-social behavior are themselves not feeling right. They have the feeling they have to listen and obey those politicians in power themselves. They are, in a way, not strong enough to say, why would I listen to you? So it is not only the scapegoat that gets fooled, but it is a very common phenomenon. And I think politics could not do without making people feel like you are not wise enough to live on your own, you cannot think for yourself, you are too stupid, and it's when people don't feel like they are enough that they start listening to someone else. So it's like a two-step process. First, you get them to stop believing in themselves, and then you can get them to do what you want them to do, like hurting certain people. Or it is not just the people being hurt, it is also the people being aroused into aggression that really do have a problem. Yes.
So, in a way, Stephen, you're saying that it's an appeal to people's sense of inferiority, their sense of inadequacy, that they don't feel right about their place in the world. They may not feel comfortable in their own skin, as it were, and so they're looking for this external entity, this external power to make it right and make it easy. And it's an easy way to get there. In a way, what you're describing, I think, what it makes me think is that it's the classic appeal of cults, right? I mean, that the person becomes bigger than who they are because they can join up with this external group that can define them and can give them something to believe in, because they're lacking that. They don't have an inner sense of belief. They don't have an inner core of faith or belief or whatever it is. And so they fall into this kind of experience, this kind of collective experience, actually, of like a group think as a way of feeling empowered, and it gives them an instant acceptance and an instant recognition and an instant chance to date women. I mean, whatever, like an instant chance to be somebody, and not actually do a lot of heavy lifting to get there. It's sort of, you just swear loyalty to this idea, and all of a sudden you have this almost intoxicating sense of power.
I think what you're saying is very crucial. You understand very well. And the thing is that it is a false sense of power, because in essence, you are giving away your power. You are not standing up straight and talking for yourself. You have surrendered. You have this inferiority feeling, which is a common human trait, character trait. And because of that, you say, oh, well, I'll just let the group decide, and you are no longer yourself. And when you say you have power, I think you have given up your power, and there is very little real power to be gained that way. Yeah, yes, yes. But it may seem that way, indeed. Yes.
No, I mean, it's interesting because you're right. I mean, you're surrendering your power in order to get an illusion of power.
Yeah.
You're surrendering your own sense of autonomy as an individual, and to become a part of this illusionary collective. The other factor that I think goes into the fascist mindset is greed. And when I say greed, I mean this idea that fascism or communism, however we want to describe it, it promises that simply because you exist, you're entitled to a piece of your neighbor's property, because your neighbor is part of the scapegoat. They're ripping you off. They're, whether it be Jews or whether it be the top 1% richest people, or whether it be, the upper class or whatever it is, that you are entitled to a portion of what they own. And it appeals in a very dark way, to the darker side of our nature, where we covet our neighbor's property. We think our neighbor has a better house than we have. They got a better car than we have. Their wife is prettier than our wife. Whatever it is, we want, either we want a portion of it, or we want to see them torn down to our level. We want to see them knocked down a peg. And fascism, communism, whatever you want to describe it, it's one of the promises that they make. They're going to equalize things. They're going to go to your neighbor, take away that which he has over you, and maybe give you a piece of it so that you can get what you somehow are entitled to, the sense of like that they deserve something, and that there's been an injustice of the very fact that someone who has more than you exists.
Yes, I think what you are talking about is really being seduced by your ego. You know, it's like there is this voice in your head, this tension in your body. You're not feeling comfortable, and that thing which I call the ego as a psychologist is trying to get a grip on you. It is in a way like it is suffocating you, and then it can take you over and it can do as it wants with you. So in a way, to accept this seduction really is already on a very primal level surrendering your power. It is the first step, and then you are like, yeah, you are in chaos, you have no more control, things start happening. And I don't think really on the inside you are happy with what is happening. But you have been seduced and your power has been surrendered. And then other egos come in, the whole big system takes over, and you are part of it, and you are no longer, as I'm saying, it is important to stick to yourself, not to, it is very difficult. It is also like, to me, a spiritual thing to not give in to these darker sides of yourself, you know.
No, it's
I
so
don't,
interesting.
yeah.
No, I mean, you talk about the giving into the darker tendencies. Um, I think at the very core of the whole fascist experiment, and when I say fascist, I'm broadening the definition to include all of the socialistic experiments: fascism, Nazism, communism. Is this nihilistic idea that reality can be invented, that you as an individual, you talk about the ego, that reality is whatever you think it is, whatever you say it is, that the conditions that we live in, the social conditions, are artificial constructs, that it's all kind of put together, and that ultimately at its core there is nothing. I mean, everything is subjective. You decide what's true. If anyone says otherwise, they're prejudiced. They're like, they're exceptional. They're exceptionalists. They're egoists, and that you are in a sense the very center of your own universe in those ideologies. It's all a matter of perception, and it's a matter of creating new social constructs based upon what you think is what existence is. There's no objective truth. There's no immutable set of laws or principles that come from a divine creator or that come from an external force. It all emanates from the human being. I mean that, and so therefore you're demanded that you participate in this group as a way of changing realities, of changing nature to fit a better image, which is always a fuzzy idea anyway.
Yeah, well, so the way I see it is, to be blunt, I think we are a kind of hallucinating race. And first, it begins with our self-image, our ego. We start seeing ourselves somewhere there before our eyes, where there is really nothing. And the more we believe and identify with this element of our psyche, the more the element and the realm of illusions get a grip on us, and we have the need to, or we feel the need to realize those illusions. And the illusions are rather arbitrary. They can be anything. but I think there is some kind of measure uh, that is the material world, like nature, the physical world, your body. Like your mind can ask things that your body can't produce. The human race can ask things that the earth cannot produce. So we can invent things as we want them, but it doesn't mean because we can make it up somewhere in our heads that it is realistic. So I do think that this nihilism, this thinking, oh, there is no measure for truth and reality, and we can invent all we like. I think there is a sort of reality, our earthly condition, which we need to take into account, and we do that much, not enough. We follow our illusions way too much, and it's eating us, and we are really hallucinating. It's not, we don't have our eyes open, we don't see reality anymore, and indeed you can go so crazy as to invent the most outrageous things, but can the earth, can your body, can reality, is it realistic? I think we should try to stick to having a sense of reality in all of our whatever is possible in our heads, you know. Yes.
Yeah, I totally agree. I mean, if we have a sense of reality, a sense of order, then we're going to be immune from these kinds of uh, ideologies that seek to radically change human nature. And when you talk about hallucinating, it reminds me of an article written by Aldous Huxley, the author of Brave New World,
Yeah.
just before he committed suicide in 1963. He talked about the world being, and I think this is what his book was about too. I've not read it. I've read in it, but he talks about the world being an international drug-induced concentration camp that will all be on some kind of a, literally a hallucinogenic substance, a controlled substance at some point, and and thus we will all be controlled. And the entire endeavor of the modern fascist Nazi movement, you know, the socialist movement, is all about control. In fact, I think there's an element of psychology that is all about control, the methodology of it, this idea of how to control and how to manipulate the human psyche in a way that they will be malleable to whatever particular agenda is being promoted at any given time. Uh, do you think that I'm onto something with that?
I think, yes, I do. I even don't think you need drugs because people are hallucinating spontaneously, and if you give them enough promises and paint enough pretty pictures and beautiful commercials and TV shows, and as long as in there somewhere where they are seeing it, things are okay, then it doesn't matter if their neighbor is starving or if the earth is dying. It, they cannot. It is. I think from what I've been reading and thinking about, I think it is the hardest thing to do to get out of your illusions and deal with reality. So I think you don't need to push them that hard. They are already inclined to be looking there in some cloud where all of their self-image lives and all their self-objects and their nice luxurious lives, and it is all right in their heads, in their minds, and they are living in their minds, but their minds is not reality. And I think the biggest challenge for humanity is to let go of their mind, let go of their ego, and start dealing with the world and start healing the earth and start healing each other and start seeing what is really necessary, instead of running after those promises and being fed all those fake images of how all right everything is. It's scary, and yeah, when you say Aldous Huxley, it's somewhere along those lines for sure. Yes.
No, I mean, it's interesting. I think that you make the point that, in a way, we all are in sort of a state of hallucination or hypnosis. I mean, we're all influenced by everything that's going on around us. There's millions of pieces of information that are swirling around us, and that's something that, in a way, all political movements to an extent, but certainly fascism, tries to manipulate by using mass psychology techniques. I read a book a while back. I don't remember the name of the author. I think it was Timothy Poole, but it was about how the Nazis used media in a way that had been unprecedented up until that point to manipulate people's emotions and to manipulate, therefore, their mind and to get them to submit. And they used the example of these Nazi rallies that would be where it would be a complete sensation. I mean, they would control what you see, what you smell, what you hear. They do it at night with these massive bonfires, and they would have a parade, and they would have Wagner, and there'd be music blaring, and it would create this kind of mass movement, this mass collective experience. I mean, to the point where women were fainting and they were having orgasms, and it's like it was totally like a complete submission, a complete control in a mass level, and that the Nazi movement really brought that up to a very high level. I mean, it's certainly been used in advertising and in media in the United States. We could talk about Edward Bernays, the author of Propaganda, which was published in the early part of the 20th century. He was Sigmund Freud's nephew, and he's viewed as the father of Madison Avenue, the father of modern marketing. He actually convinced Americans that they should have bacon and eggs for breakfast. He convinced women to smoke cigarettes. Used certain images and promoted it and did it on a mass scale with all media. Television, radio, print. Billboards. Use of well, back then they didn't have social networking like we have now, but they would do like rumor campaigns, whisper campaigns, getting people to talk about something. And it would all be very orchestrated, very coordinated, to the point where they could literally change people's perceptions of themselves, or they could change. In this case, they were trying to sell something, but it was like a mass psychological manipulation, and it's based upon this principle that we are all trying to understand what is real every day. You have to make thousands of calculations. The brain is capable of probably of making millions of calculations, and that this is something that can be manipulated in the right using the right techniques and the right tools, and certainly politics generally does this, but fascism brought it up to a high art. What do you think?
It is a difficult question. I have the rather unuseful habit of blaming people for being the way they are. But in fact, I don't think you can blame them. I think you have to pity them, because when you look at the, the psychology of the ego, which is always seducing you into biting in the apple, and going there where it wants to lead you. It is an instance which controls a lot of your body and your movements. It can freeze you, it can suffocate you. So to free yourself from the tendency to let's say, bite in the apple, to free yourself from the tendency to follow up on these urges they put into your head, it is very difficult. So you can say you're not buying that, you're stupid, you're gullible, you believe things too quickly. But when you experience the pressure that comes with the fear, the almost like suffocation, the desire, the need to, it is really very hard. And you have to work on it and you have to be conscious of it. And the thing is that you can try to become conscious of that habit of being too easy believing and too easygoing. Uh, but even if you start resisting that weakness, then even still your surroundings will say, you should. It is the people start controlling the people. The government, they don't even have to interfere anymore. The people will control the other people. And when you have to, like in India or so, they step away from society, they go in a solitary space, because when you are just a common man in a common surroundings, it is very hard to bring yourself to a point where you are no longer vulnerable and you are no longer open to being misled and pushed and pulled. It is very hard, and I always blame people. I say, if only all of you weren't like that, why do you buy all these things, all this stuff, all these lies, all these images? You are just stupid. But I I have my own problems with them too. I can have to have something, and I go crazy because I need to have it. And I think it is something that is very controlling, and it it is asking for a way and a development and an evolution. But you should become aware of the fact that you are vulnerable to start with, and that is maybe something people can inspire in other people to become more conscious of it. Yes.
Well, Stephen, I guess that makes me wonder, how can you can you talk a little bit as a psychologist about how we can wake ourselves up to these tendencies, how we can wake other people up to the tendencies? I mean, I think that one of the roles that religion plays is that it gives you an external set of values and beliefs and morals that generally restrain the more excesses and the the more darker side of human nature. It doesn't abolish it, but it causes you to understand the consequences of it, and by controlling sin and by controlling avarice and all of the seven deadly sins, so to speak. Um, how do you, as a psychologist, address that? I mean, when you're trying to talk with someone who has been really, taken over by these ideas, what do you do to help I mean, to use a lack of a better word, to deprogram them, to debug them?
Yeah. Well, I think where you should begin is by seeing that I see it as that there are two sides to a man. There is the soul, and there is that which is keeping the soul down, which is keeping us frozen and suffocated. And that is the part that is being fed by all this propaganda and stuff. It is only to keep you down. But in order for you to be needing to keep yourself less down, you have to strengthen the other side. So you have to choose your own truth more often. You have to start being who you are. You have to start saying what you feel. It is difficult, but I think there will be less need to compensate and to put on a fake face, which is where you are vulnerable, where you are weak, and you have to strengthen your soul side, you know, in a kind of a way. So then it becomes less necessary to impose all this compensation, and there another way becomes available that way, I think. Yes,
Yeah, I mean,
from a
I think that
dynamic there. Yeah.
like my particular religion, Judaism, gives an answer to that, and according to our understanding, it comes directly from God, and that is to set aside the seventh day of the week as a day of rest, you know, the Sabbath. The idea that you step outside of the ordinary working day where you're caught up in the rat race, you're caught up in all of these intense situations, and you maybe don't have a chance to sort of stop and think about who you are and what you're doing. And you have to stop everything once a week and, you know, shut everything off. You know, of course, now it's hard to get kids to shut off their cell phones, but that's another story. You know, you have to kind of decompress and maybe reflect and read and think and take a walk and rest, spiritually rest, really, and physically
Yeah.
rest. And I think it's a time to make sure that the week is broken up by this great gift of a moment to completely have reflection and to begin to take a look at everything you've done or what you thought about, and then reorder things so that you can look forward to the next week and maybe look at it a little bit differently. You gain a certain a certain spiritual sense from the experience if you do it right.
Yes, it is a spiritual path because you have to have faith in your own truth and your own soul and your own heart, and you have to believe that if you side with that, everything's going to be all right and everything's going to be better, because the the way not only other people but also that ego in your head is trying to say, oh, I wouldn't say that, I wouldn't speak of that, I wouldn't, and you are once again pushing yourself away and choosing something that is more social, more propaganda, more acceptable. But you have to be strong and you have to believe and you have to start looking for yourself. It is something that many people are doing these days, more so than let's say a century ago. It is very fashionable to go seek yourself, but it is necessary because it is the only way that you can find something which is worth more than all of the external validation that you get for taking part in a rat race where no one is really close to his soul or in his power, and where everyone is just manipulated, and it just is very unstable in that reality. But you can find a power and you can grow a power from listening to yourself and being yourself, uh, passively through meditation or actively to speaking out, or you know, if you're okay, you say okay, you start being yourself and not covering yourself up all the time, you know, because society can only provide the covers. They put you full of covers and what you can be, not to be yourself, but society would lose its power if everyone started being themselves. They could not control that. If you are yourself and everyone is themselves, there would be no way they could manipulate you, because it would just slide off you. You wouldn't you wouldn't
Yeah,
take it anymore, you see?
it's like you
Yeah.
inoculate yourself from these external powers that manipulate. And while you can
Yes.
certainly be influenced, you can ultimately look to something else to ultimately inspire you. And I mean, in my opinion, that something else is God, but it can be some kind of an external fixed idea that cannot be manipulated. That there are eternal truths that can be identified, and that the sovereign person who is thinking for themselves is in the process of identifying that thing and researching it and thinking about it and applying it. So very interesting, Stephen. What are you working on right now? What is your latest project?
Well, I've kind of like begun two new books. One in English, which is like small essays, reflections, and thoughts, and then one in my native language in Dutch, which is kind of a series of essays um, giving a condensed uh, picture of the way I have been using psychoanalysis to talk about the world, about politics, about religion, about all sorts of things, really. But I have come to kind of my own special interpretation, and I think it is rather useful, but I have to present it in a very clear way. So that is what I'm doing, trying to make myself clear and clear over and over again, you know. So maybe in the end, someone will see what I'm trying to say and will maybe, be happy that they understand this or that. Just writing, really.
Oh, it's a wonderful
Yeah,
thing. I'm an author myself, and writing
I
is a
see. I
tremendous,
saw that. Yeah,
yeah, it's a tremendous way to clarify your thinking and to go a little deeper into something that you're passionate about. I've urged people to write. I think in this day and age, almost anybody can write because we don't have to necessarily have a big publishing house, and you can get access to research online. You could join archives, join
yeah.
academia.edu. I mean, it's fantastic, all these resources that you can draw from and really do the necessary research to really develop a thesis. So, and your work is very interesting, Stephen. I really congratulate you because to get into the psychology of politics is something that it's a field that really needs some expansion. And I hope that I can see that you're one of the leaders in it. So, it's an honor to talk to you.
Oh, I'm very flattered. I don't get many compliments, so it's very, 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 yeah, it's very welcome. Thank you.
Well, let's stay in touch and maybe drop me a note when your new book is coming out. We can do some more programming, and I'm building this online experience with people. So I have different people dropping in from time to time and to do something because they want to talk about something. I'm always open to that. And
Sure, sure.
thank you very much. And I want to thank you for joining me today.
Thank you for having me, man. It's been a real pleasure.
Thank you, Stephen. Have a great afternoon.
All right. Bye. Thanks.
Bye-bye. Thank you, sir.